and the title of this paper is One Altar to Serve Them All, New Joins and Ancient Altars in the Visions of Amram.
Thank you very much, Nicole. First of all, I would like to join the gratitude and thanks of my preceding speakers to Henrik Jeckner and Michal for organizing and running this conference so efficiently. Thank you all, also for the speakers for your enriching talks and discussions. I have learned a lot, I'm sure that all of us have. Just put my point. One word of apology to Matthew Groves. There will be no slides of Humpty Dumpty's presentation. I'm sorry, I'll try to compensate for it. And finally, I must begin with commenting that the thoughts and suggestions I will present today arise from my work which was done as part of a larger project on the re-edition of Aramaic scrolls from Qumran, directed by Professor Elisha Kindon and Christian Schrader, sitting here from Ben-Gurion University. Christian, thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this very important project. And now, without further ado, I would like to present some thoughts and some suggestions concerning an Aramaic composition known only from Qumran, which includes the deathbed speech of a priestly forefather. I'm speaking, of course, about the Aramaic document, the Visions of Amram. This composition is preserved in 7 up to 9 copies. The already censored is something problematic here. There are big problems of assigning and attributing the different fragments of different manuscripts. I will not talk about it if you're interested, as Haneke or Dan, they dealt with it extensively. All of the copies are very fragmentary. Nevertheless, they allow us to get at least a glimpse of the main outline and some of the, let's say, scenes of the composition. So what does Visions of Amram tell in broad lines? The story begins around a family gathering around Amram's deathbed, where he organizes a marriage of his daughter Miriam to his brother Uziel, followed by blessing one of his sons, probably Moses, though this is debated. Then after Amram starts speaking to his children, he tells them about his sojourn in Canaan, where he went to bury his forefathers, and after several turns of events, only partly preserved, Amram receives a dream vision from 2 angels, where he is first called to choose between light and goodness on the one hand, or darkness and evil on the other, represented by the 2 angelic figures. Followed are, fragments of what seems to be reports about Amram's progeny, their names, their deeds, their glorious future. The composition apparently ends with a description of Amram's death, burial, and the birth of his descendants. This brief description raises several of the central themes of this composition, the way I read it. First of all, focus or interest in family laws and ethics, on the one hand in issues like chastity and proper marriage or endogamy, but also issues like devotion of children to the parents and the care of parents to the children. Children should bury their fathers. Fathers are happy when their children behave rightly and have marriage feasts. Related to this, let's say, general familial interest in a more concrete attention to lineage, particularly priestly lineage. After all, Amram is a son of Levi and the father of priests for the eternal generations. And lastly, there is also some interest in what I would call, following Michael Stone, the axis of history. Amram, or the composition as a whole, tells his children about things that happened in the past, and it provides some glimpses about things that will happen in the future. So providing some, let's say, bits and pieces of a historical review, though it's not simply a review. After all, is focused particularly on cult, priests and cult, and this leads me to the focus of my presentation today. I will first offer you a reconstruction, suggestion of reconstruction of a cultic passage, then examine it in its broader context in Second Temple period literature and beyond, and then consider some of the implications of this reconstruction and its parallels. So let us begin. I will begin with fragment 9 from the 5th copy of the Visions of Amram, a relatively large fragment. I would like to highlight several points. In line 4, we find a mention of Mount Sinai, out of context, I mean in broken context, but nevertheless a noteworthy mention because Mount Sinai is hardly mentioned in Qumran literature in general and in the Aramaic scrolls in particular. What it's doing here, well, maybe we'll see in what follows. Next line mentions Mikdash Nafsha, a copper altar. So this is the altar that was used in the tabernacle and later in the Jerusalem temple. Its mention here again is quite obscure, but at least we already feel interest in cult and its particularities. The next lines mention someone who will be elevated as a priest from all the people of the world, and his sons after him, for all later generations. So a strong emphasis, a strong stress on the election and elevation of the future priests, and particularly on their genealogy, probably from Amram. On the basis of this reading, I would like to read already in line 5, Brecha Rabba, your elder son, who will probably officiate on the copper altar or will be commanded concerning the copper altar. In any way, I think that this means very likely that this priestly lineage is directly related to Amram's sons. Lastly, in line 8, Amram tells in the first person, and I woke up from my sleep and wrote the vision. So this is a formulary concluding of a vision, as we've seen yesterday in 2 days ago in Dan's presentation, and I'll come back to this line in a minute. Now, there is much to be said on fragment 9 as it stands, but before doing so, I would like to examine the possibility of associating it with several other fragments. First, fragment 6 on the right here. Again, in the last line of this fragment, line 8, we read Unegad min levati, and he departed from me. And then in fragment 9, and I woke up from the sleep of my eyes. Again, this is a form-like wording for concluding a vision and waking up. An almost exact wording appeared in the Aramaic Levi document, and I think that this line can serve as the starting point for combining the two fragments. It allows also for a reasonable reconstruction in the preceding lines. Thus, in line 7, I suggest reconstructing from the world and until the eternal words, in Alma, the Al-Mei Al-Maya, and his son after him for all later generation. A bit repetitive, that's true, but still a reasonable stress on the eternal election of this particular lineage. In line 6, the positioning of the fragments allows for the reconstruction, and his son after him, Uvre Kohen, will be elevated as a priest. Again, expressing the same idea. So, all in all, I think that this positioning of the fragments allows for several reasonable continuous texts and is quite secure as it gets. Another fragment which I bring into this puzzle is fragment 8 on the top left. Its positioning here is less secure and is more tentative. What's important here is not so much the direct position, but what the association brings. In line 4 on the top left, we read about the altar of stones, all that I told you perhaps about the altar of stones and how they will burn offerings upon it. This is associated with the mention of the copper altar and every sacrifice in the continuation of the line. So associating fragment 8 with 6 and 9 allows us to see some kind of, or brings out some kind of comparison or association between these two types of altar. I will come back to it. One more issue that comes out from this reconstruction is the mention of Levi. He is found here in 9:3, which mentions something which Levi, his son, sacrificed upon. This is most likely the altar in Bethel, where Levi first officiated as a priest, which Jacob, your father, built. So of course, this is a rather speculative reconstruction, but it works nicely. This is how the fragments look like materially, positioned next to the other. The letters, by the way, are just copied from the actual letters of the fragments. Using a technique developed in the SQE project directed by Jonathan Bender from Haifa University, today in Tel Aviv, which again I had the privilege to take part in. I can talk about details of reconstruction later on if anyone is interested. This of course does not prove anything, it just shows how this reconstruction could look like. Final piece that I bring into this puzzle is a tiny fragment 5, which indeed contains about 5 words. But even these few words allow to associate this fragment with the conglomerate of 6, 8, 9, which you've just seen. Fragment 5 mentions Korbana and Krav, so sacrifice and giving a sacrifice. Similarly, fragments 6, 8, 9 also mention that which gave the sacrifice, the burning of offerings, and every sacrifice. So both discuss the sacrificial performance, sacrificial practice. Next, fragment 5 mentions that after him came Noah. Nothing more than that, but this is enough to show some interest in lineage, in succession, and probably particularly a succession of sacrificial figures, because Noah is one of the first people to have offered a sacrifice, as Hillel just told us. Similarly, in 6, 8, and 9, we read about Levi, his son, who gave a sacrifice, about your elder son, about his son after him, and about his sons after him for all the eternal generation. So reading all of these fragments together seems to reflect, let's say, a succession of sacrifices from the very primordial history down to the generations of eternity. And to these pictures, fragments 6, 8, 9 also add some interest in the places of cult, Beit El perhaps, but definitely Mount Sinai, and also some interest in the instrument of cult, the altars, stone altars and copper altars. So to sum up very quickly, all of these fragments show or describe to some extent the cult and its succession, the lineage of or the sacrificial lineage of those who officiated throughout eternity on in the right places and altars of cult. So far about the Visions of Amram. How does this fit into the larger picture of let's say, secondary literature and beyond? So I will bring only very few examples to try to situate this passage. Beginning with the motif of succession of cult, it was discussed repeatedly throughout these days, and of course repeatedly throughout scholarship. What's important for me is various or multiple manifestations of this idea. One very common and very well-known manifestation is a succession via instructions. A father tells his son how to operate according to what he has learned from something. And we've seen several expressions of this idea in the Aramaic Levi document, different in the Testament of Kahat, also in Jubilees, and I will not go into detail. What's happening in the Vision of Amram? Well, Amram is not instructed, neither does he give instructions concerning cult, but this is true, of course, for the parts preserved from the composition. So I cannot tell, I cannot stress too much the negative finding, but what we can tell about what is found in Amram is a somewhat different expression of that motif, and this is succession through revelation. What do I mean? I will bring first an example from an Aramaic composition called 4Q537, sometimes called Testament, or perhaps to be identified with Testament of Jacob. Here, some unknown speaker reports a vision which he had, in which probably an angelic figure showed him written tablets and told him, now take the tablets and read, and the speaker indeed took and read all my repression and everything that would happen, and here the text breaks, as usually happens. But in a different fragment, which apparently still relates the words of the same speaker, he tells how he saw or read how the building should be and what perhaps they will be clothed in something, and how they will be offering up sacrifices on the altar, and how something they will be eating some of their sacrifices somewhere, and the water that will be going out of the city and underneath its walls, and where they will be flowing somewhere, the text breaks. With all the gaps in the Qumran, it's still quite clear that what we have is a description of the cult and the structure of some future place, very likely the future Jerusalem. Now the speaker does not give any hint that he is instructed how to cut. There is no, let's say, operative aspect to this description. It simply tells how the cult, the right cult, shall take place and where. A different manifestation or different expression of this AD, or let's say succession by revelation, is found in rabbinic literature. Here take a source from Genesis about 44, which Hillel pointed out in his forthcoming article about Noah's sacrifice. The Midrash describes Abram's covenant between the pieces until that God told Abram, take me a threefold heifer, a threefold she-goat, and a threefold ram. The Midrash comments, he, that is God, showed him, that is Abram, 3 kinds of bullocks, 3 kinds of goats, and 3 kinds of rams. And they skip, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, the Holy One, blessed be He, showed Abram all the atoning sacrifices. That is, what we have here is not a command to take animals and sacrifice them, but actually a vision of all the future sacrifices which will be, part of the Israeli cult. So what have we seen thus far? Last form of this motif is what I would call a succession via altar. What do I mean? Again, I take one example from the rabbinic literature, again from Genesis chapter 34, which describes Noah's sacrifices. He, Noah, offered whole burnt offering on the altar. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said, on the great altar in Jerusalem, where Adam sacrificed. So this short saying presents a continuous direct line of succession from the first sacrifice whatsoever in history through Noah's sacrifice to the sacrifices being done or that were done in Jerusalem. Now I must say I'm not familiar with this particular motif in Second Temple literature. In rabbinic literature it can be found in several forms, but it can perhaps call to mind the focus or the interest of the vision of Amram in altar in some way. Again, I do not identify these both motifs, but they perhaps help to illuminate one another, and I'll get back to that. So what did we have thus far? We saw multiple manifestations of the succession motif via instruction, revelation, altar, also by genealogy, the same people from the same familial line continually sacrificing apparently in the proper way. We saw this in multiple milieus, in Aramaic scrolls from Qumran, and maybe not only from Qumran, and also in rabbinic literature. Where does Amram fit in this picture? So on the one hand, he offers more of the same. He tells us how from before Noah, through Levi, to Aaron, to his sons forever, the right cult is being performed. But he also adds some particular emphasis, or has some particular interest in the altars, the stone altar compared to the copper altar. And into this picture is also brought Mount Sinai. How does all of this work? So here we'll follow a suggestion of Rob in his article about the cult of the Aramaics in the Visions of Amram, that Visions of Amram presents a continuation or continuity of the cult, but with some awareness to development or change that happened probably in this period, around the revelation on Sinai. And this is the last point that I would like to delve a bit more into it, Sinai as a turning point. And in order to illumine and try to have a better grasp of the wording of the Visions of Amram, I would like to bring in one last rabbinic discussion, which is found in many parallels. I bring the version from Palestinian Talmud Megillah, and here we find, as usual in rabbinics, debate. Rabbi Elazar said the children of Noah, Bnei Noach, sacrificed peace offerings, shlamim. Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina said the children of Noah sacrificed whole burnt offerings, or lot, only. And the passage brings various arguments and counter-arguments for each view. Among them also, Rabbi Elazar objects and says, it is written that Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices. So not only burnt offerings were offered, but also regular other offerings, listed as peace offerings. How does Rabbi Yosef explain this? He agrees with the view that Jethro came after the giving of the law, which is in stark contradiction to the plain meaning of Exodus, but in accordance with an established rabbinic view. What lies behind it is a different question. In any case, what's important for me is that Rabbi Yosef, in order to refute the objection to his view, focuses on Mount Sinai. And he says, yeah, Jethro came after Mount Sinai. From this point on, all cult or all offerings are done according to Jewish law, or actually rabbinic law. It is before Mount Sinai where perhaps there was a change. There was a different law of cult. So Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosef, the discussion that contained them, all reflect on the one hand a sense of continuity, because the cult before Sinai, the cult after Sinai, the Jewish cult, is a continuation of the cult that was done beforehand. But there was nevertheless a turning point, and the revelation of Sinai perhaps or could introduce some change into the cultic practice, at least as far as Jews are concerned. And I think that what is so expressed and explicit in this rabbinic source, perhaps also lies behind the wording of the Visions of Amram, that is stressed on Mount Sinai, is an equation of the stone altar from the patriarchal era with the copper altar from the tabernacle onwards, reflects exactly the sensitivity that at Sinai something changed, or at least could have been changed. And Sinai is exactly the point where I should say, you should know that what's happening after Sinai is exactly the same as what's happened since the days before Noah. So, some concluding remarks. I tried to provide today a better understanding of this episode in the Visions of Amram, as well as a clearer picture of the succession motif in its various manifestations and of Amram's place in it, which on the one hand is the same. He's repeating again the same motif and the same ideas, but nevertheless slightly different. has its own nuances. In addition, I hope I'm going to demonstrate some of the interrelationship between this literature and rabbinic traditions, which exhibit sometimes common traditions, sometimes common sensitivities, but also different responses. So reading these literatures together can help us not identify them with one another, but rather have a clearer picture of sensitivities, of concerns that may lie lurk behind subtle wordings and phrases. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to our results.
Wow, Shlomi, ברוך שחנך מחוכמתו לעניין. Amazing. A small comment and a question. A small comment that maybe the reconstruction of, I know that it's not used, the reconstruction of 537, there is a common mistake because the water that's going outside the wall, the water is reconstruction. And according to the equivalent in Mishnah Tamid, you could reconstruct and I think that it fits better that the priest itself is going out and that fits better to your picture because after he woke, he got out and בכהן יצא מתחת למחילה, יצא מתחת לבינה, and it's equivalent of the Mishnah Tamid and this scroll, and I think that it fits better to the picture that you're trying to describe that this scroll is giving us.
Thank you very much.
We're happy. And the question just teach me, if you could, why you reject the idea that the complex discussion in rabbinic literature about shlamim and olot, it's not an objection, it's just a question for explanation. It reflects something about their attitude against Gentiles if they could send olot or shlamim to the mikdash, they could eat something, it's something to look at. So I'm just asking if you could explain your way of reading it.
Just to clarify for the audience, Hillel is asking me to continue a discussion we had on the flight from Warsaw to Rome. I think that my best, simplest answer would be that I think that we have here two different perhaps you can say modes of discussion. On the one hand, the chronology, what happened before Sinai, what happened afterwards. And in this sense, the the debate that I saw speaks about Bnei Noach, Noachai, children of Noah, which is usually terms for humanity or particularly to non-Israelites. But at least the way it is formed in its complete form, within the complete debate, the complete discussion, apparently the Israelite, non-Israelite distinction is turned into a before Sinai, after Sinai distinction. So this is one line saying what happened in the past and how did the revelation of Sinai change things. Another discussion is, let's call it horizontal, us and them, Jews and non-Jews. And it brings into discussion a completely different set of considerations. So this is not to say that both these discussions are not related and that they cannot illuminate each other, but they cannot very simply be equated. So if I want to learn from the discussion about the children of Noah, what is which actually is a discussion about the past? That's how I understand it. What is the rabbi's idea about accepting of a sacrifice from the Gentiles, which is a matter of the present? It requires several additional steps in between. There will be several additional, let's say, answers that I will have to, several additional questions that I will have to answer before I'm able to make any kind of equation. So the fact, let's say, that Rabbi Yosef says the Noachai did not offer sacrifice, not offer peace offerings, do not allow me to immediately conclude what would be his opinion concerning receiving peace offerings from the Gentiles. For one thing, you could say, all my discussion concerned is pre-native, but after Sinai I agree that of course they bring these offerings, so what happened with the temple? Well, that's another discussion.
Thank you for the paper. That has been a great flight, so unfortunately neither of you are coming back to Canada with me, so I'll maybe keep my comments brief and happy to talk after. Yeah, I love the paper. Thanks for your remarks. I think this fragment 9, is probably more interesting than could be the right word for it in many ways, Visions of Amram. I have a comment and a question following the tradition of my colleague. Comment, I'm not as convinced it's as secure as it gets the way we're putting these together, but I'd like to hear more about it. I think the approach and method, as far as I understand, is helpful for reconstructing lost text within fragments, less helpful for stringing them together, but I'd like to hear more about it. But I do have a question. I think you've touched on something very important in the work on the fragment. I do think it's secure, fragment 9, around Sinai. And Sinai and institutions within the dream vision is very interesting. I'm curious to know how you think about that. Have you thought about this as it relates to another fragment, which has only been touched on, 545, fragment 4, that speaks to the mystery of his work. And how are you seeing, or do you have any thoughts on what that might mean in light of what you're developing here, which is, I think, a more ambitious view of Sinai and of...
You mean this one?
Yes. So how are you seeing, what does that term mean here in light of, or does it change what we might think of it in light of the approach you're taking?
By this term you mean the natural
I'm thinking in line 16 and 42545, fragment 4. This is talking about the mystery of the priestly work.
Yeah, but I mean the one on the left.
Yes, I'm having trouble seeing from back here, but yes, I think that's what you're pointing to.
Yeah, okay. So we'll start with your second question. I had something to say about this fragment. Actually, I wanted to speak about 5 through 13, the same text which Vera discussed yesterday, but I omitted it because I didn't have time. Actually, I didn't think about Razovade. I was more interested in the Shvi'i Be'enosh, but him being the seventh among the men of his goodwill. How do you translate Enosh? So eventually, I'm afraid, I don't have much to add to the discussion about this mysterious term, the mystery of his deed, other than being, let me tell you, what you still don't know about the things he will do in the future. So, I think that Razovade is not really esoteric. I mean, it's not that he will have some esoteric office or ministry, but rather that his office at your time, Amram's time, is esoteric because it didn't come to pass yet. So anything that in this sense, anything that the angel tells Amram about the future is in some sense Raz. Again, and I admit it, I'm not sure it really brings out the full meaning or the full associations of these terms. There's still something more in it, and I really find it difficult to express it, also because the text is so fragmentary. About the reconstruction, if you like, I can put some minutes. I think the easiest way would be to say that, first of all, certainly the reconstruction that I suggested is completely tentative. In some points, let's say, more tentative or more speculative than others. And the reconstruction, the copying of letters, let's say the reconstruction of the font of the scroll helps me to more accurately evaluate the distance between fragments. So even when I just put fragments next to the other and I don't actually know the lacunae, so I can tell whether the reconstruction in one line fits with the reconstruction of another line, or whether I'm completely off the mark. So of course, again, it doesn't prove that the reconstruction is correct. It basically allows me to avoid implausible reconstructions. But all this concerns only the reconstruction of the lacunae. The association of the fragments itself, actually in this case, depends mostly on text, where I can find reasonable text flow from one fragment to the other in several successive lines that lends credibility to the association.
I agree. I understand. I think the challenge I have still is, I think it makes sense from a material perspective, using, recreating the hand of the scribe, but the words, actual content, are still not extant. So it's still
It's my guess.
Yeah, and I
So-
think that's important to know. But it's very helpful. Thanks for your paper, Shmuel.
Perhaps one last comment about reconstruction. I must say that all the, let's say, discussion about the general ideas of these fragments 5 through 9 and the broader context could have been done without a material reconstruction. I could put this as Rob has done, actually. I should immediately. I read your article after reconstruction. I told her I was immensely disappointed to find someone for a bit before me. But I was also very happy to see that, okay, there's someone else saw that it really works. It's not only my traits ideas. So these fragments speak in the same language, express similar ideas, and they can be associated, let's say, thematically, even if you do not say, this is exactly, excuse me, this is exactly how they stand. So even the reconstruction, material reconstruction remains a suggestion. I think that their association together is very suggestive, much more secure. Let's put it this way.
Is this seven generation? Maybe it's Hanoch, who was in charge of Ktoret, according to Jubilees. Might this be an idea? If you find here Noach and then the rest of them, Abraham.
Well, the best answer is read Kister's article as usual.
Pardon?
The best answer is read Kister's article as usual. But yeah, what I wanted to bring out, yeah, that's exactly. And what
you don't want to suggest it here, the idea that you have here.
What I wanted to say that first of all, 5 through 13, well, certainly presents a line of, let's say, election, that forefathers that were elected one after the other. It begins with a figure before Noah. It's probably Enoch. The problem is that Enoch is with a question mark because the name is preserved on a detached fragment containing only this name. Now it makes sense to put him just before Bahaba, but there is no direct join, so that's why it remains tentative. Very suggestive, but still tentative. In any case, they will have a list beginning from before Noah, and then Noah, Abram, Isaac, Jacob, Levi, and someone from Levi, probably Aaron. But this person from Levi is one officiating yearly to atone for the congregation and teach them mysteries. So we certainly have here 7 figures. They quite certainly come from, let's say, Enoch to Aaron, or actually to the high priest. Aaron actually stands here for the contemporary high priest. And what I also wanted to point out that we have here a lineage, but also election. So it's not enough to be born to the right father, you also have to be elected by God. At least until you get into the son of Aaron, and from then on, one of his sons is always a high priest. It doesn't need to be elected, apparently. So this allows me, I also want to note that this allows perhaps to interpret the phrase in Visions of Amram, the 7th among his chosen people, or the people of his well-being, goodwill, which perhaps refers to Aaron being 7th to Enoch. Not in generation, because there are too many generations from Aaron to Enoch, but in terms of, let's say, election. Perhaps.
I have another question regarding Mizbach HaNechoshet. It's very interesting because in Exodus 21 you have the Mizbach Adomat HaSeli. How is that? Interpret this as
It's outside the temple.
Pardon?
It's outside the temple. I mean, this.
Oh, in the temple itself, that's what you have to have, otherwise you can use Mizbach HaBanim. So
We do not know. I mean, in rabbinic terms, I could say there's a difference between Mikdash and Bama, temple in the high place, which in a certain period it was allowed to sacrifice in high places. But again, I do not know of comparable discussions in Qumran literature. Certainly the language in Visions of Amram do not allow to speculate how he would interpret the earthen altar. So I think, let's say, the farthest I'm ready to go is to offer a comparison between the patriarchal altars and the temple, or the tabernacle/temple altar. How we understand this, the command about earthen altar, I simply don't know.
Thank you, and this concludes our session.